Good afternoon, my name is Mike Turpey. I'm a Scottish Blue Badge tourist guide here in Edinburgh, and we're doing a virtual live walking tour. We've been playing about with technology just now, so hopefully you can hear us okay. But please let us know any comments or whatever feedback, we'd appreciate it. So I've got Joe Harrower here, who is going to share this tour with me of the Grassmarket here. So what I'm going to do is just pass you over to Joe just now, and then you'll be passed back to me. Here he is. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to quite a sunny Edinburgh here on quite an historic day. This is the first day that Edinburgh has actually opened up our street cafes, so it is live. You're going to get some background noise, and we're going to take you on a little walk through the Grassmarket. Join us.
Okay, so I'm just going to start the tour but now, and if you can see behind me, we've got the iconic Edinburgh Castle on its rock, 340 million years old. Basalt, which is a residue from lava flows. Edinburgh, of course, if you know it, it's a very up and down city, and it had 7 volcanic vents, and that's one of them that ancient castle is sitting on. It's got the oldest building in Edinburgh up there, goes back to about 1130. It's called Queen Margaret's Chapel, and this is one of the most spectacular parts of it, you know, this view, because artists and poets and writers just love coming down to the Grassmarket and looking at this view. So I'm just going to let you have a wee look at that. So raise it up a little bit. Now Edinburgh just now is quite sunny, as it tends to be a lot of the time. We've got a reputation for rain, but we do get rain, but we don't get always as much as people think we do. So it's sparkling today in the beautiful sunshine. Now the Grassmarket traditionally was a place for the selling of goods. It was originally a loch. It was flooded with water originally. It was called the South Loch, and we had a North Loch as well around the castle, but that was all drained, and this place was laid out as a marketplace in 1477 and given permission to trade by King James III. And they used to come down from the Highlands with their sheep, and they would be selling them here in open pens, sheep, cattle, horses, and it was a very sort of smelly, disgusting place to be. It was one of the few open enclosed areas of Edinburgh, if that makes any sense, and there was executions here as well, and there's terrible smells, and because of that it was popular for the market, because up in the old town further up it's more enclosed and you didn't get so much wind, and if you had a market like this one up there, you'd be falling over because it would be so unhealthy with the terrible smells. Now what I'm going to do next is to draw your attention to this area here. You can see down the middle, it's beautiful, it's very grassy, rather a lot of green, not grassy, I'm thinking of Grassmarket, but a lot of greenery, and there's the open door cafes, beer gardens if you like just now, because in the Scottish lockdown or easing of lockdown, we've now permission to come outside and have all the good things like beer and whiskey and wine and so on. So it's a relief for many people to get outside their houses and come down here. So I'm going to just point you down here. I don't know if you can see this okay, but there's a plaque here which actually commemorates the Corn Exchange. And there's a corn exchange here in the 18th century, not far away from here, and then there was a later one which was built here in the Grassmarket too. So even into the early 20th century there was a lot of market activity happening here. And take you another view, we'll just start walking. And down the left hand side here is a row of pubs, and it's one of the most favourite areas to come out here if you want during summer and enjoy outdoor eating and drinking outside. And we've got some really sort of historic pubs here also. So it's the Grassmarket. Many people think, why is it called that? Well, it was really because there was a lot of grass, there was a lot of hay, there was a lot of that for feeding and bedding down the livestock that people were selling here. So it was also a place for selling produce too. but mainly horses and sheep. So we've got over here, just behind me, the Beehive Inn. Beehive Inn, one of the popular iconic pubs in Edinburgh, and believe it or not, they've got the door from the condemned cell from the old Carlton jail, which is actually in the Beehive, so it's a bit of a conversation piece. Where else would you get things like that? Only in Scotland. So walk here, it's just beautiful just now. There's these buildings. There's a kind of mixture of periods here. I'm just going to move out the way of the traffic. We're doing our social distancing as well. Some of these buildings, they date back as far as the 17th century, but there was a lot of renewal because of terrible conditions, overcrowding and fires and so on. So into the 19th century, we have what's called the Scottish baronial style of architecture revival, which is a kind of Italianate Renaissance style architecture with a Scottish slant, and that is really what a lot of these buildings are that you can see there. And there is the Beehive Inn there. I'm just going to take a little walk over here, and you can observe the people out having their outdoor tipples. Yeah. And here we turn around again. Old phone boxes. They're not really used that much nowadays, of course, what with the advent of mobile phones, but that is quite nice to see that. Quite iconic. Keep walking. Yeah, there was a lot of terrible distress here. There was buildings even, right into the 19th century, which were hugely overcrowded. In fact, you would get about 30 people in some of these tenement buildings before things were improved, and it said that you could get there was more fever in one of these accommodations than you would find in a wet pool of filth. So it's indescribable what the conditions must have been. I'm just going to wander, there's the streets behind me here, and on the slab here down there, it commemorates the dropping of a bomb during the First World War in 1916. There was a Zeppelin over Edinburgh, and there was a few people injured. One person died later on, but Edinburgh was one of these cities. The old town was fortunate to get off during wartime, and a lot of the bombing would take place around the port of Leith in that area too. Now, I'm just going to swing around. You can see a kind of mixture of some modern architecture, and some of the hotels, some of Edinburgh's main hotels are sited here too, in the Grassmarket, the Apex Hotel. And funnily enough, that used to be a university accommodation going back to 1960s, 1968. There was what was called the Mountbatten building, which was there, but now it is a hotel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Joe, and he's going to take you through the remainder of this tour of the Grassmarket. So over to Joe. Okay.
Thank you, Mike. And how are we all doing? Hope you can hear us all clearly. There's a bit of background noise here. I'm just going to take you through a little bit walk and give you some of the stories of the Grassmarket here. Mike mentioned that the Grassmarket was established in the 15th century, so I'm going to take you a little walk through some of the centuries here and give you some little stories that relate to it. In fact, I'm outside here, the White Hart Inn. The White Hart Inn is quite a famous pub here. This side of the Grassmarket is all lined with restaurants and pubs. Very, very lively place to be. Indeed, at the weekends, it's open till about 3 o'clock in the morning. But the White Hart Inn pub here, it was established in the early 1500s, or the middle of 1500s here. And it's here that Robert Burns actually stayed. And it's said that this is the last place in Edinburgh that he stayed in during his last visit to Edinburgh. So it's quite famous. And of course, you can't go through any tour of Edinburgh without mentioning ghosts. This is supposed to be one of the most haunted pubs in Edinburgh. Now, Mike did mention also that the Grassmarket was a place of execution. And indeed, during some of the more famous executions, some of the people here who had apartments and flats would rent out their apartments. and encouraged people to come in so they could view and get a great view of the executions that took place. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the executions, some of the executions that did take place here through the centuries. Now, one of the things about the Grassmarket here is it still is a market here on Sundays. They still have a little market here. It's a very lively place to come to, very enjoyable. I've turned around here and you'll see some people here enjoying the first day out in the restaurants here. And it is live, it is loud. And this is what we think about the Grassmarket. And here we've got a little wave. Where are you guys from? Oh, we've got locals. You can get a table. There we go, from Edinburgh. It's a live broadcast. There you go. There you go. So the introduction of the locals here is good. Some of the locals can get tables. Come summertime, usually we can't get tables in this city. It's very, very popular with tourists. And I would highly recommend, if you're not from Edinburgh and you're coming to the city for a visit, I would highly recommend coming down here. Make reservations though. It can be very, very busy. There's places for all tastes here. So you get French, you get Italian, you get Mexican food, you get Scottish food. It's a very international little square. And indeed, in the early 1900s, this was known as Little Italy, because a lot of Italian immigrants came here, and this is where they established themselves. And we still have some remnants of the Italians here. We've got some little Italian gelaterias, I can't even say that word, and ristorantes here. So you'd be more than welcome. Now, if you're famous or infamous in Edinburgh, you can get a pub named after you. So I'm going to start talking about one of the famous characters here in Edinburgh. Her name is Maggie Dixon. I'm talking about the early 1700s. Now, Maggie grew up in the town of Musselburgh, which is about 4 or 5 miles to the coast on the east coast of Edinburgh. It's a fishing town, and she was a fishwife. Her husband was a fisherman. However, he disappeared. Now, we don't know if he was shanghaied into the Navy, that happened quite a lot in those days, or if he went to new pastures to make more money, to other ports. But Maggie was left on her own. Now, poor Maggie. She had no fish to sell, she had to make a living some way, so she moved down to the border towns, Kelso in particular, of Scotland. She had a job in an inn. While she was there, the innkeeper's son had his eye on her, and they started little dalliance together. And Maggie got pregnant. She concealed her pregnancy. And as it came time to give birth, she actually concealed it and went over to a river, and she gave birth on her own on a riverbank. Now, we don't know if the baby was born premature or if it died there, but she left it. She went back to the inn. However, she was discovered. She was then tried under the Concealment Act. This is where you conceal a pregnancy. She was found guilty, of course. She was brought to Edinburgh. And punishment there was to be hung by the neck. So she was brought down to the Grassmarket and she was hung by the neck. They cut the body down. There was a bit of a riot going on actually between the family and the university, because the university wanted to claim the body to take it up for dissection at the university itself. But the family won out. They got the body, they put it into the box, they put the box on the cart, and they made their way back to Musselburgh to bury her. They stopped halfway at an inn for some refreshments, a little rest stop, and they were notified there was a noise coming from the box. So they went out to the box, and Maggie was alive. She had come alive again. So Maggie survived. Now, under Scots law, you cannot be tried for the same crime twice. So Maggie was free. She went on to live a long time. She lived for another 40 years. She would then be known as Half-Hanged Maggie. Her name was Maggie Dixon, and as I said, if you're famous or infamous in the city, you can get a restaurant or a pub named after you. And here we have Maggie Dixon's Pub. But that wasn't the only execution that took place here. In fact, there's another pub here called The Last Drop. Now, you would think that this would be the last drop with your last drop of whiskey, your last drop of beer. No, this is where people had their last drop. And indeed, to commemorate this in Edinburgh, here in the Grassmarket, I will try and point this out to you. On the sidewalk or the pavement here, we actually have an impression of a gallows. can see if I can follow this up here. Might not be able to make it on the pavement, but if you come down here, you will see that on the pavement here we have the layout of a gallows. Now this wasn't the only place where executions took place, but it was one of the most famous. And indeed, in the end of the 1600s, we had a terrible time here in the 1600s. We had the period known as the killing times. And we were involved in civil wars. We had a king who was executed. We were under Cromwell. Then we had a restoration. I won't go into too much detail. But what it resulted in was a lot of people being held captive. And at the end of the 1600s, there was a lot of revenge going on here. There was a group of people called the Covenanters. The Covenanters were held in an open prison not very far from the Grassmarket. And they were brought down here. And they were brought down here in their scores. And it said that over 100 people were hung in a short period of time just because of their religious beliefs, known as the killing times. So we got a story from the 1600s, 1700s, then we get to the early 1800s. There's a couple of characters that you may have heard of called Burke and Hare. Now Burke and Hare were quite notorious in this city. Edinburgh University was one of the most famous universities in the world. People were queuing up to get in to the medical school. Very, very famous medical school. And one of the reasons it was famous is because it had a good supply of corpses, so the anatomy classes were supposed to be the best in the world. Now, they wanted corpses. Normally, as I mentioned before, they could actually get the corpses from the people who were executed, or for vagrants or unclaimed bodies. But the demand was got more and more for fresher corpses. Now, Mr. Burke and Mr. Hare, who happened to be Irish, who were over here as labourers, saw there's a bit of an industry going on here. And the whole industry started known as the resurrectionists. This is where they would actually steal the bodies from the graves. But this was a good business, a good industry, very enterprising, very entrepreneurial. And there was a professor at the university called Dr. Knox, and Dr. Knox was very welcoming. He would accept the bodies. In fact, he got more demanding and wanted fresher corpses. He never complained where they came from. So Burke and Hare started to go on a spree. And they went on a killing spree. They thought they were getting more money from the university the fresher the corpses. This became grand. However, as always, some of the victims they picked on were a bit too close for comfort, and they started to feel the heat. All the evidence was pointing to Mr. Burke and Mr. Hare, and they were captured and they were put on trial. Now, in this country, if you turn king's evidence, then you got a lighter sentence. Indeed, you got let off. So Mr. Hare turned evidence on Mr. Burke. Mr. Burke then stood trial, and he was put on trial, and he was hung by the neck here in Edinburgh, and his body was used for dissection at Edinburgh University. His skeleton still stands at the University of Edinburgh, and if you've got such a, shall we say, a taste for the macabre, his death mask is also available at Surgeons Hall Museum if you want to go and see it. And also in Surgeons Hall Museum there is a wallet or a pocketbook made out of his skin. So I guess the crime fits the punishment fits the crime. There's a little song that was created here in Edinburgh. I'll see if I can remember it. It goes: up the close and down the stair, Butt and Ben wi' Burke and Hare. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, but Knox was the man who bought the beef. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I'm going to say thank you for joining us for a little tour of the Grassmarket. We will be doing other little tours to get introduced to Scotland. And remember, when you come to Scotland, always ask for a Scottish Blue Badge guide. You'll notice us, we're the ones wearing our badges. We're qualified. And here's Mike coming in to say goodbye.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.